Hi, so changing chords is the thing that most beginner guitarists that I've maybe been playing for a few weeks, it's the thing that they struggle with the most, I would say. So when you very first start playing, it sort of hurts the tips of your fingers, and you're trying to get your fingers to get in the positions for certain chords, and that's the hard part. But once you've been playing for a little while, just a few weeks, a couple of months, then it's changing between the chords that people struggle with. So I'm just going to give you some little tips on that. Right, so the first one might seem a bit obvious, but when you're playing a chord and you've got to go to another chord, look to see if any of your fingers are going back to the same note they were previously on. So for example, if I'm playing a C chord like this, and then I go to an E minor, which is that. Now what I just did was I played the C, I took my fingers away, then played the E minor. But this second finger just went back to where it was, because it was there. And then in the E minor, it's still there. So that means, even though it wasn't that difficult to do because I'm very familiar with the chords, it still seems a bit pointless and it's unnecessary to take this finger off and then put it back on again. And it's not just about the speed of the chord change, although that's a big part of it. So if I do this, I'll demonstrate it, I'll leave that one on. Now, partly it's going to always be quicker, because if you're taking a finger off and putting it back on again, it's going to take up time. So if you leave it where it is, it doesn't take up any time. But another thing that happens when you do this is that if you leave that finger on, the other fingers aren't going to be tempted to come very far away from the fingerboard. Because when you first start playing, you don't have as much control over your fingers as you do when you've been playing for a long time. And you'll find that if they all come away, there's a tendency for them all to kind of lose their shape and sort of move away a little bit and then come back into that E minor. Whereas if that one stays there, there's a limit to how far away these are going to go. I mean, if I really try, I can make them do that, but that's uncomfortable. You know, it doesn't feel very natural to point those out when that one's there, so I'm unlikely to do that by mistake. These aren't going to come very far away, even if you're a beginner. So that's a really good thing, because the less distance these have to travel in to get the next chord, the better. It's all about distance you're moving when you're changing chords. The smaller the distance, the better, or the quicker it'll be. So C to A, E minor, leave that middle one on, and then do whatever else you have to do to get that chord, which is, in this example, is move that up to there and take that one away. And you try to do those at the same time. That's the other thing to practice, moving those fingers at the same time. So C to E minor is a good one to practice. Another good one, even easier, is C to A minor. You start with C, and then this finger just has to move underneath the second finger. Now you might find when you do that, this thing has to shift back slightly to let this one in. But it didn't come off of the string, it just went like that. You get a little squeak. And then going back the other way, I don't keep that second finger exactly planted where it is because it's a bit of a stretch, so I just go like that. So that's one thing. Look for notes that are common notes between the two chords. Another thing that can happen is when you change between two chords, there might not be any common notes. So for example, A, one of the first chords you might learn, and D, also one of the first chords for most people. So there's nothing the same in those two. Everything is in a different place. So that means that there isn't a common note played by the same finger. So I do have to move all of my fingers for this chord change. But this third finger, I'm aware, by the way, that some people learn these chords with slightly different shapes, but I'm using the same fingers that most people would use for these. So this finger here, which is second fret on the second string, that can stay on the string and just slide along to go to D. A bit like we did with the A minor, where that finger went like that, except it was within the same space. Here, it's actually going to another note, but because it's on the same string, keep it on, and the main thing that achieves is what I was talking about a minute ago. It stops these from going too far away, so it keeps everything close. So A to D, they lift up, that slides along, they go back down. Ideally as a pair, just a single movement. That's a good one to practice as well. And then the other thing, just to quickly mention about chord changes, and I'm always saying this in my lessons to people, if you're struggling to play a particular chord change, so you're playing a song and one of the chords is difficult to get to from the previous one, if there's nothing that makes that easy, so if there's nothing like no common notes or no notes on the same string where you can leave your finger on, if there's nothing like that to make it easier, because sometimes there isn't, like, you know, if I'm playing E to G, it's just a complete hand movement. Not that you're going to get that chord change very often. So if there's nothing easy about it, then you just have to be very good at playing the second chord, which should make sense. So if you're playing a particular chord to another chord, for example, one that people often struggle with when they haven't been playing for very long is B7, because for a lot of people it's the first chord they learn that uses all four fingers. Well, let's say I'm playing a G, then I've got to go to a B7. There's nothing the same. There's a note that's the same, but because of the fingers I'm using, it's a different finger that lands on it. So there's not really anything that we can keep the same in that chord change, which makes it difficult. So it means that to go from G to B7, you just have to be good at B7. There's no other easier way, really. You just have to be good at that chord. And the way to practice that, and this is another thing I might have mentioned on some other videos, I'm always showing people this little trick. To practice that chord, keep your fingers on the chord, lift them off very slightly, like a millimetre or so. Put them back on again, maybe play it. Lift them off slightly further. Put them back on. Lift them off a bit further, so it's about an inch away now. And a bit further. And by the time you get to sort of here, your hand will probably do, your fingers will do this, they won't be in that shape anymore. But the idea is you're trying to keep the shape. And you end up taking your hand right away from the guitar and right away and come back up here, just put it anywhere and just come back onto that chord. But you have to do this gradually. I'm used to that chord, so I can do that straight away, but if I wasn't used to it, I'd have to do this first. And it ends up so that you can do a B7 in the air, or G, or a D, or C. And your fingers get so used to those shapes that you can just do them in the air. And then you know that you're going to be able to get to them from any other chord. I don't think I've forgotten anything, but I might have done. I didn't plan this one, I just spontaneously did this one. So yeah, I think that's about all I can say about chord changes for the moment. But if you've got any questions about it, please put them in the comments. And if I have forgotten anything, I'll do a follow-up video. Okay, thanks for watching.